the idea that studying late antiquity is a problem. What does that mean? Why is it a problem to study late antiquity? Well, let's see if here, in the next few minutes, we can come to some understanding of why this might be a problem. The problem itself has actually arisen most acutely in the last generation. As I mentioned a moment ago, when I was a student, this issue was really just for the first time raising its head. The origins of the term late antiquity are somewhat obscure. It appears that the phrase was first used among art historians in the late 19th century. They were looking for a way to characterize the art that emerged after classical art had begun to decline, or at any rate to change, and before medieval art in all its rich profusion had really begun to emerge. Roughly speaking, the period from about 300 to 600 AD. What we'll see in some later lectures, when we'll have a chance really to talk about the art and the architecture of this world, is that classical forms, classical styles, classical modes of production persisted, but the subject matter of art changed dramatically. So it was an attempt to capture this art, old styles, new subject matter, that spawned in amongst art historians a tendency to discuss the world of late antiquity. In 1971, the then young and relatively unknown historian Peter Brown, now one of the most distinguished historians in the world, professor at Princeton, he was then at Oxford, published a small book called The World of Late Antiquity. This was like a bolt of lightning in the academic world, and nothing has ever been quite the same since. By 1996, 25 years after Brown's book, the distinguished historian Glenn Bowersock was able to say rather serenely, the time has come for scholars, students, and the educated public in general to treat the period between 250 and 880 as a distinctive and quite decisive period that stands on its own. In other words, it would have seemed in a way that the problem had either passed away, or perhaps that there was a sense that students and the general public hadn't yet really come to an understanding of what this problem was, or indeed why there is one. So let's talk about this a little bit in the next few minutes. The problem of late antiquity has several dimensions. First of all, why must we make a case for it? Why must we argue for this particular way of thinking about this period that runs from sort of, 300 to 600 or 250 to 880, which then, of course, leads us into a second problem. What exactly are the chronological boundaries of this period? When do we start and when do we end? In what respects is this period distinctive? In what sense is this period quite decisive? Quoting again Bowersock here. How do we understand this period? Now, let's approach the problem by beginning with some of the traditional understanding against which upholders of the late antique model have struggled. As is, I think, pretty well known, it was Renaissance humanists who first created the tripartite model of European civilization: ancient, medieval, modern. Now, medieval thinkers themselves, this is important to say, thought in terms of long-term continuities. For example, Alcuin, who was a great friend of Charlemagne, late 8th, very early 9th century, Alcuin commented, as Charlemagne was building his new capital at Aachen or Aix-la-Chapelle in France, Alcuin commented that to this new Rome was being added the wisdom of Athens and the faith of Jerusalem, so it would be greater than all the Romes that had preceded it. But again, you see no sharp break, continuity. Greece, Jerusalem, Rome, Aachen. In the 12th century, Bernard of Chartres, great teacher in the school of Chartres, had said, "We are as dwarfs seated on the shoulders of giants, that we might see more and further than they, yet not in virtue of the keenness of our eyesight nor the breadth of our vision, but alone because we're raised aloft on that giant mass." Now note two things there. First of all, smack in the middle of the Dark Ages, he said, "We see more and further than they." No sense of, oh, poor us, it's the Dark Ages and we can't see anything. No, we see more and further than they. But an acknowledgement that we are great because we are raised aloft on that giant mass. Once again, a powerful sense of continuity, not of rupture. It was among Renaissance thinkers in the 14th and 15th centuries that we begin to see the emergence of the idea that Rome had fallen, ushering in a dark age from which they, these Renaissance humanists, were only beginning to recover. Rabelais had said, "Out of the thick Gothic darkness our eyes are being enlightened."